pride ever got you in trouble? I don't know, maybe it's when your brother punches you, so you punch him back twice as hard, and you have this knee-jerk reaction to try and even the scale out, and it really got you in trouble because your parents disregarded that your brother punched you first, and you're the one who got in trouble. Or maybe you're on the football field, and somebody tackles you, so you decide, all right, he's going to tackle me like that. You get up, and you punch him in the face, and you get thrown out of the game. You tried to even the scale, but it failed in the end. Have you guys ever been in that situation where your pride has gotten you in trouble, where your knee-jerk reaction has gotten you to fail, where you trying to balance the scale has been your demise? See, we all struggle with pride. It's something that's normal to men. I mean, you look back at the very first sin after the Garden of Eden, Cain and Abel, and really, that boils down to pride and jealousy. I mean, there's something about men, always, when they get into a room full of men, they always want to one-up each other. They always, one person makes a joke about you, you instantly make a joke about their mom. I mean, it's just common dude behavior. God made us this way. But that doesn't necessarily mean that God likes it. Today I want to look at a story of a man nicknamed a man after God's own heart. And I want to tell you a story of how when he was in conflict with another man, how their pride, David's pride and this man's pride, were going head to head. And I want to tell you the story about it and how it almost got David in a lot of trouble. We see in the Bible that David is in charge of these 600 men. And David, if you haven't read anything about him, he definitely struggles with pride. Now David is in charge of these 600 men, and he's watching this man Nabal's sheep. Nabal is Nabal. Nabal is this rich man. He owned 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. And David and his 600 men were watching this man's livestock. He was protecting them from any outside forces, making sure nobody stole the sheep or goats, making sure no wild animals attacked the sheep or goats, making sure the shepherds stayed safe. And so David thought, okay, I'm doing this deed for Nabal, right? I'm protecting his livestock. It's only right for Nabal to even the scale out. And so he asks Nabal, okay, Nabal, well, he sends 10 servants to Nabal to ask Nabal. He says, all right, Nabal, I'm doing this deed for you. So would you mind evening the scale out and feeding my men? I mean, it's only right. The only reason that you have food to begin with is because I've been protecting it. And so David sees the scale like this. And he says, Nabal, just feed my men, and we'll call it even, and you'll give me my due wages, right? And so David sends 10 servants to Nabal with that message. Now I want you to notice how prideful and arrogant and self-centered Nabal's response is to David's 10 servants. Turn with me to 1 Samuel 25, verses 10 and 11. 1 Samuel 25, starting in verse 10. And Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who are breaking away from their masters. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meat that I killed for my shearers and give it to men from I do not know where?" So Nabal is saying, I don't care that you've been watching my sheep. I don't know you anything. And so while David thinks that the scale is like this, Nabal thinks that the scale is like this. He says, I don't know you anything. I don't care that you've been watching my sheep. I mean, they're mine. I'm not just going to give them to you. And so David sees this as Nabal repaying evil for David's good actions. David thinks, I've been watching this dude's sheep, and he doesn't even want to feed me? Oh, I'll show him. And this is a prime example of David punching back twice as hard. Let's look at David's response to Nabal in verses 13 and 14. And David said to his men, "Every man strap on his sword." And every man of them strapped on his sword. David also strapped on his sword. And about 400 men went up with David, while 200 remained with the baggage. So David had this plan. He said, okay, he doesn't want to feed me? I'll show him. I'll slaughter him and every single dude that is under Nabal's control. He says, he doesn't want to even the scale out? I'll even it myself. And so he sees Nabal as punching him. And so David says, oh, I'm going to punch back twice as hard. But we see that that's not the best idea. I mean, normally, if somebody doesn't give you food when you ask, it's not a good idea to just slaughter him and every guy near him. That's normally not an appropriate response. But yet it's the response that David took. It's that prideful, knee-jerk reaction to try and even the scale himself. We see that David even went so far as to make an oath to God. Not only did he plan to kill him, he said, God, if I don't kill him, you better. But take a look at what David says in verse 21 and 22. Now David had said, surely in vain I've guarded all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of him, all that belonged to him. And he has returned me evil for good. God, do so to the enemies of David, and more also, if by morning I leave so much as one male of all who belong to him. So David says, you know what? I'm going to murder him. I'm going to murder everyone in his family. And if I don't, God, you better. Seems kind of exaggerated, right? It seems very prideful, but it's not so uncommon from our lives. I mean, a lot of us have that same mentality, but maybe just on a lesser degree. Probably because we don't have 600 men that we're in charge of. Now, right as David is getting ready to try and even the scale himself, Nabal's wife interjects. And Nabal's wife's name is Abigail. Now, Nabal is this dumb, arrogant, prideful, stupid man. Abigail, on the other hand, is this beautiful, humble, intelligent woman. Very kind. And so, right when Nabal sends the message to David's servants, pretty much saying, screw you, David, I don't know you anything, one of the servants that overheard that conversation goes up to Abigail and is like, Abigail, little problem. So, your idiot husband decided that he wasn't going to feed David and his men, and I'm pretty sure that David's coming right now to slaughter everybody. And so Abigail's like, oh my gosh, my stupid husband is at it again. I gotta make up for this. Oh, what am I gonna do? This happened last time. My gosh, my husband's always getting himself in trouble. And so she loads up a whole bunch of food on some donkeys, and she says, all right, I'll go out to David before he gets here and before he slaughters everybody, and I'll make amends. And so she rides on her donkey, and she goes over to David, and what she does, right when she sees David, is she falls on her knees. And she goes head first, right at the feet of David. A total sign of submission. A total sign of acknowledging David's kingship and acknowledging David's authority. And Abigail, while she is at the feet of David, she's pleading with David, don't kill my idiot husband, please. She says, don't slaughter everybody. I mean, evening the scale out yourself isn't going to do any good. Look what else she says in verse 26. She says, now then, my Lord. This is after David had agreed that he wasn't going to murder everybody. Verse 26. Now then, my Lord, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, because the Lord has restrained you from blood guilt and from saving your own hand, now then, let your enemies and those who seek to do evil to my Lord be as Nabal. See, Abigail knew that if David were to try to even the scale himself, it wouldn't do any good. In fact, Abigail knew that if David had tried to even the scale himself, it would have disqualified him to his higher calling. See, God had this purpose and this calling on David's life to be the next king over all of Israel. And she knew that having blood guilt, that having innocent blood on his hands, would have disqualified him of God's calling for him to be king. So David doesn't kill Nabal. He doesn't kill any of Nabal's men. And God ends up rewarding David for not acting out on his pride. God rewards him that even though the scale is like this, God rewards him for letting it stay like this. And for not feeling the need to even the scale himself. God ends up evening the scale, actually. Later on in the chapter, we read that God ended up killing Nabal. And so God didn't let the scale stay like this. It says all throughout the Old Testament that vengeance is the Lord's. That it's not our job to even the scale. And we should leave that up to somebody who's a little bit better judge than us. See, like David, each and every one of us in this room have a special calling to us specifically. And maybe that's not to be the king over all of Israel. Maybe that's not to be the president of the United States. But maybe that's to be a pastor at a church of 5,000. Or maybe it's just to be an associate pastor. Or maybe a youth minister. Maybe your calling is to be a missionary. Maybe your calling is to be a church planter. Or maybe your calling is to just faithfully serve a congregation of 60 for 25 years. No matter what your calling is, God is calling each and every one of us in this room to something special and something big. And it's something that has your name written on it. And if David would have acted out, if David would have tried to even the scale himself, he would no longer have God's endorsement on him. And I'm afraid that some of us in this room will act out on our pride. And I'm afraid that some of us in this room will have that knee-jerk reaction. And when somebody wrongs us, we feel the need to even the scale. And I'm afraid if we do that God will no longer have his endorsement on our calling. I'm afraid that it will disqualify us of God's calling. There's no need to even the scale ourselves. But we need to act humbly and swallow our pride and be okay that the scale is like this. Jesus never retaliated. Every single hit, every single beating, he never tried to even the scale. We should learn that. We should remember God's call in our lives. And we should try our hardest to never disqualify ourselves. Because in our own prideful efforts, we fail. So let God even the scale.